The restaurant was cozy and warm, filled with a soft hum of light jazz and dim enough to hide secrets in every corner. Chloe sat by the window, her fingers nervously grazing the rim of her wine glass. Across from her, Joe, her new friend, or perhaps more than a friend, smiled with a casual, confident grin that made her heart race. Tonight, Joe had taken her to this quiet, hidden spot in the city. There was no risk of running into anyone who might recognize her, or so she thought. She had gone the extra mile with her makeup, double-checking everything before they met. Chloe knew the power of looking perfect. Joe got up from the table, excusing himself to use the restroom. As Chloe fixed the stray hair and patted the sides of her mouth to ensure her lipstick hadn't smudged, a thought crossed her mind. Joe was taking a bit longer than expected. Maybe it was just nerves, she told herself, but she couldn't shake the slight chill running down her spine. Her phone buzzed softly, pulling her from her thoughts. She looked down and her heart skipped a beat. It was Alan, her husband. The call caught her off guard, especially since he was supposed to be at work. Clearing her throat, Chloe answered in her sweetest tone. "Yes, honey? Darling." Alan's voice was calm but edged with something she couldn't quite place. "Where are you right now?" She felt a bead of sweat forming at her temple and quickly laughed it off. "I'm on a date, just kidding," she replied, her voice playful. "I'm just catching up with some friends from the conservatory, honey." There was a short silence before Alan spoke again, his words sharp and clear. "Unfortunately, it's not a joke. Turn around, Chloe." The words echoed in her ear. She froze, her heart pounding, and slowly looked around. There, in the dim light of the restaurant, seated at a far-off table in the corner, was Alan. He gave her a slow wave, his face unreadable. Her throat went dry. Taking a shaky breath, she held her phone tightly, whispering, "Alan, why are you here? Why aren't you at work?" Alan's voice remained calm. "Change of plans. I thought I'd grab a quick bite. But imagine my surprise when I saw my own wife sitting here with some guy, looking a little too cozy." His words hit Chloe like a punch. Her pulse quickened as she grasped for an excuse. "Wait, what? You're misunderstanding. You think I'm on a date? What about you? You're sitting with that pretty woman over there." Alan chuckled softly. "That's Jessica, Chloe. My lawyer." Chloe's heart plummeted, leaving her grasping for words. But she wasn't about to let Alan or his lawyer friend get the best of her. She took a steadying breath, straightened her shoulders, and with a hint of a smile, made her way over to their table. Her heels clicked softly on the floor as she approached, and she took her seat next to them with all the calm she could muster. "Well, hello there," she said politely, giving Jessica a small, polite nod. Jessica nodded back, looking composed though her gaze was sharp and steady. Chloe didn't waste any time. She turned to Alan, her voice sweet but edged with challenge. "Honey, I have to ask, what's going on here? Why are you out having dinner with a lawyer? Did something bad happen that you haven't told me about?" Alan looked at her, a small, unreadable smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Well, Chloe," he said slowly, "I suppose you could say I'm in a rather unpleasant situation. It's kind of embarrassing, really." He leaned back, looking between her and Jessica with a shake of his head. "I never thought I'd be here, sitting with my lawyer. But here I am. You know, I just hope I'm not getting fitted for reindeer antlers this Christmas." His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. Chloe felt her cheeks burn, but she forced herself to smile, keeping her voice light. "That sounds awful, honey," she replied, turning to Jessica with a small laugh. "What do you think, Jessica? Imagine that your husband, who says he works the night shift, is actually secretly spying on you. A little paranoid, don't you think?" Jessica's smile was smooth, her eyes giving nothing away. "Oh, trust me, life has a way of surprising us, which is why I'm here, to help couples through times like these." Chloe let out a soft chuckle, though her heart was racing. "So, a divorce lawyer. Huh? Well, Alan, I'd hate to see you jump conclusions. It's just dinner with an old friend, you know." She looked back at Alan, the smile never leaving her face. "A little impulsive of you, don't you think?" Alan took a long, slow sip from his glass, his eyes steady on Chloe. When he set it down, he gave her a calm, almost amused smile. Chloe, you know I'm a calm, rational man. I don't make decisions on a whim. I prefer to think with a clear head. He leaned forward, his gaze piercing. So, why don't you go ahead and tell us about Joe? Is he a friend, or maybe something more? Chloe didn't miss a beat, her own smile holding steady. Alan, please. I've told you already. Joe is a friend from the conservatory. He's a brilliant pianist. She shrugged, keeping her tone light. We just happened to meet up tonight, in this beautiful place, to talk about music. And, creative people like us, musicians, artists, we tend to be a little more expressive. But that's all it is. Alan raised an eyebrow and let out a small chuckle. Expressive, huh? Well, Chloe, let's hope that's all it is. Because if it's not, we're going to have a lot more to talk about. Chloe laughed, waving her hand dismissively. Jessica, you might want to note how your client here loves to provoke. Honestly, Alan, that innuendo is pretty bold. Jessica simply shrugged, watching the exchange closely but without much reaction. Alan's expression turned more serious, though a slight smile remained. So, Chloe, he said, his voice calm but firm, you're telling us that you and George is friends? No intimate involvement. Chloe looked from Alan to Jessica, then back to Alan, a playful glint in her eye. Alan, we're just friends. Pure and simple. Unless, of course, Jessica here considers a love of music a reason to file a suit for infidelity. She laughed, glancing at Jessica, who chuckled and shook her head. Oh, I wouldn't go that far, Chloe, Jessica said, smiling. I think I can handle the situation without getting too dramatic. Alan smirked, clearly amused. The whole scene was almost funny to him. Her quick defenses, her breezy responses. All right, honey, he said, leaning back and crossing his arms. But I'd love to hear what Joe thinks of your friendly relationship. It would be interesting to get his take on things. Chloe kept her chin up, her voice steady. Of course, Alan, she replied. Once Joe's back, I'm sure he'll back me up. Not sure why he's taking so long, though. She forced a little smile, though her fingers tightened around her glass. Before anyone could say more, Alan leaned back in his chair, pulling out his phone and tapping the screen. Chloe, we actually don't need Joe here. He might show up eventually, but I thought you'd prefer to hear what he has to say right now. He lifted his phone slightly, his expression unreadable. A recording began to play. Chloe and Jessica exchanged quick glances, both bracing themselves for what was about to unfold. First, Alan's voice came through. Hey, man, is that cute redhead over there your friend? Joe's laugh was easygoing, a little too comfortable. You could say that, he replied. But what's it to you? Alan played along, keeping his voice light. I've just always been amazed at how easy some guys make it look to pick up women. Maybe you could give me some tips, huh? Doesn't come as naturally to me. Joe's laugh was low and smug. Oh, man, I don't know if you can teach it. Some of us just have it, Alan's voice then shifted, a little more playful, but still pressing. Hey, so tell me, people say redheads are the hottest in bed. That true? You get anywhere with her? Joe didn't even hesitate. He laughed, sounding almost proud. Oh, they're wild. All right. That one, man, she does things. Let's just say, if I'm not careful, she might break me. She bounces like crazy. There was a moment of silence in the recording before Alan responded, Wow, lucky you. Joe chuckled again, sounding pleased with himself. Lucky? I'd say so. Just hoping she doesn't wear me out tonight. You know what I mean? Alan then thanked Joe for the conversation and wished him luck. The recording ended, and the restaurant's background hum seemed to fill the sudden silence at their table. Chloe's cheeks flushed, and her fingers curled around her glass. But she quickly forced herself to sit up straighter, clearing her throat as she struggled to keep her expression composed. Jessica's gaze was sharp, her loyalty instincts taking in every reaction. Alan, meanwhile, watched Chloe with an amused, expectant look. Chloe forced a smile, though her voice wavered. Well, Alan, she began, trying to maintain her calm, I think Joe was just, showing off. Men say all kinds of things when they think they're bonding with other guys. He's clearly just joking around. Alan raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a slight smile. Joking, huh? Sounded pretty detailed for a joke. But I'm all ears, Chloe. Go ahead, explain away. Chloe straightened up and forced a small laugh, though her face was flushed. Alan, really, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Joe is just a bragger. He loves to joke around and exaggerate. Honestly, the guy's got a wild imagination. He probably thought he was just being funny. She turned to Jessica, hoping for an ally. Jessica? I mean, can we really consider the wild claims of a guy who talks like an idiot as proof of anything? That's ridiculous. People say all kinds of things. Jessica's expression didn't soften. She gave Chloe a tight-lipped smile, looking mildly entertained. I think I've seen enough for one night, Chloe. This isn't my usual kind of event, but I have to thank Alan for inviting me. It was eye-opening, she said with a nod toward Alan. Chloe's face grew tense, but before she could respond, she saw Joe standing and scanning the tables, looking frazzled and confused. Alan gave a polite smile. Looks like your friend is back, Chloe. I think he's looking for you. Chloe called out to him, and Joe rushed over, clearly frustrated. Without even noticing Alan and Jessica, he burst out, Chloe, you won't believe it. Some idiot propped the restroom door shut, had me stuck in there forever. He glanced around, then narrowed his eyes at Alan. It was you, wasn't it? Are you nuts? Alan merely raised an eyebrow, smiling, while Chloe gave Joe a pleading look. Joe, let me introduce you. This is Alan, my husband. Why don't you explain to him that you're just... But she never finished. Joe's face went pale as he finally put the pieces together, his expression turning to sheer panic. Oh, crap, he stammered, eyes wide. I think I just... He fumbled for his phone. My phone's ringing. Better go check on that. He gave a clumsy nod, then practically bolted to his table, snatching his things before darting out of the restaurant without looking back. Chloe stared after him, speechless, her face a mixture of shock and anger. Alan chuckled softly, shaking his head. Chloe, looks like Joe may be a decent lover, but he's a pretty unreliable friend. Seems he's not willing to stand by you in a tough spot. He glanced at Jessica, then back to Chloe. Anyway, it's about time to pay up and head out, don't you think? Jessica rose from her chair, nodding in agreement as she gathered her things. Alan stood, giving Chloe one last look. Oh, and honey, he added with a half-smile, you'll be covering dinner. With Joe out of the picture, it's coming out of your own pocket. Chloe's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to nod. She called over the waiter, taking out her card with as much composure as she could muster. But when the waiter tried to swipe it, he frowned and shook his head. Sorry, ma'am, it's not working. At that moment, Alan and Jessica passed by on their way out. Chloe turned to Alan, her voice tense. Alan. It was a quiet evening when Alan arrived home, the weight of the day pressing heavily on his shoulders. He moved through the house slowly, tossing a few essentials into a suitcase. The day had been harder than he'd expected, and no part of him wanted to pack up everything that night. He decided it could wait until tomorrow. A few days at his brother's place sounded like exactly what he needed to clear his head. Barely an hour later, the front door swung open and Chloe stormed in. Her eyes flashed with frustration as she set her purse down with a sharp thud and made a beeline for him. Alan, what was that all about? She fumed, her voice rising. You had to make a cheap show out of everything, dragging your lawyer along, setting me up like that? Do you know how humiliating it was? She threw her hands up, her words tumbling out in a rush. And to leave me there without any way to pay? They were about to make me wash dishes or clean toilets. That's what they told me. Thank God my friend Emma came to help me out. Alan let out a laugh, a tense, stressed laugh, more reaction to his nerves than anything genuinely funny. It was a habit of his, laughing in stressful moments, and now it seemed to hit Chloe the wrong way. What's so funny? She demanded, her voice sharp. Alan raised a hand, trying to keep his voice even. Chloe, he began slowly. What instrument do you play? Chloe blinked, thrown off by the odd question. What does that have to do with anything? You know I play the flute, Alan. Alan looked at her, his smile twisting with a bitter edge. "Then maybe you should go find your lover and play a skin flute," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He gave a mocking bow. "Might suit you better. And please leave me alone." Chloe's face reddened, her fists clenching at her sides. "Alan, damn you! Are you serious? You bring that woman, your lawyer, to humiliate me, and now this? Do you want a divorce? You're just going to throw it all away because of some silly thing Joe said? You're so petty." Alan felt a sharp pang in his chest. "Chloe," he said softly, "I did love you once. And maybe you love me too. We were a great couple. But now," he shook his head, "now it's clear this means nothing to you. So yeah, I want a divorce. Because my wife apparently wants to ride piano players." The word struck hard, and Chloe's face contorted with anger. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and hurled it across the room, aiming right for him. "Go to hell, Alan. Stop insulting me." "I don't deserve this," she yelled, her voice cracking. Alan's face tightened, his own patience finally snapping. He picked up a sports bag, slung it over his shoulder, and looked back at her one last time. He gave her a curt, polite bow, and then turned, leaving the house without another word. The next morning, Chloe opened the door to find Jessica standing there, a thick stack of papers in hand. Chloe's face hardened as Jessica held out the documents. Without a word, Chloe snatched them up, her jaw clenched. Watching Jessica's calm, unbothered expression only fueled her determination. Chloe didn't like to lose, ever. She considered herself smart, clever enough to navigate whatever Alan threw her way. As soon as Jessica left, Chloe got to work. By that afternoon, she'd already hired a well-regarded lawyer and started preparing her case. Her strategy was simple: portray Alan as a jealous, overreacting husband. After all, she thought, he had only caught her having dinner with Joe, a friend, a fellow musician. Maybe Alan had just let his jealousy get out of hand. But as she thought it over, a chill crept down her spine. How had Alan known about her meeting with Joe? She'd been so careful, hadn't she? Chloe racked her brain, trying to remember if she let anything slip, but she came up empty. With nothing solid to worry her, she pushed the thought aside, feeling confident she could make this whole mess disappear in court. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. Chloe sat at the defendant's table, cool and collected. She and her lawyer had crafted a strong argument. Alan, they would insist, was simply a paranoid husband who'd taken things too far. But as the proceedings unfolded, her confidence began to falter. Alan's lawyer stepped forward with something Chloe hadn't anticipated: hard evidence. There were printed screenshots from Chloe's own phone, messages between her and Joe that went far beyond friendly chat. Her face flushed, and she hissed under her breath, "Damn it, Alan. You went through my phone?" That a complete violation of privacy. But it didn't stop there. Alan had one more ace to play: a witness. He called their neighbor, a retired man who lived across the street, who testified that he had seen Joe come into the house one evening, when Alan was working the night shift. Chloe's lawyer tried to discredit the witness, but the damage was done. Alan's case was rock solid, and Chloe's defense unraveled. By the end of the trial, the verdict was clear: Alan had won. Afterward, Chloe managed to catch up to him in the courthouse hallway. She stepped in front of him, her voice softer than it had been in weeks. "Alan, please, can we talk? Maybe we don't have to end things like this. I made mistakes, but we had something special. Isn't there any way we could try again?" But Alan's expression remained cold, untouched by her plea. "Chloe, you didn't just make mistakes. You lied. Even now, standing here, you're trying to twist things." He shook his head. "I loved you, but betrayal, that's something I can't forgive." Chloe's face fell as she watched him turn and walk away, leaving her to face the full weight of her choices. The game she had tried to play had come back to haunt her, and now there was nothing left to do but live with the consequences.